The Curtiss P-40 Warhawk was one of the most important, widely used, and historically significant American fighter aircraft of the Second World War, serving not only as a frontline interceptor and ground attack aircraft in multiple theaters but also as a symbol of resilience and adaptability at a time when the United States and its allies desperately needed an effective fighter to fill the gap between the outdated pre-war designs and the newer, more advanced machines that would arrive later in the conflict. And while the Warhawk was often overshadowed by more glamorous contemporaries such as the P-51 Mustang, P-38 Lightning, or F-4U Corsair, it nonetheless played a decisive role in numerous campaigns across North Africa, the Pacific, China-Burma-India, and even in the defense of the American homeland in the months following Pearl Harbor, providing both tactical effectiveness and a psychological boost to Allied airmen and ground forces. The origins of the P-40 Warhawk trace back to the Curtiss P-36 Hawk, a radial-engine monoplane fighter that entered service in the late 1930s but was already becoming obsolete by the time war broke out in Europe, and Curtiss engineers, seeking to modernize the platform without embarking on a completely new design, decided to adapt the Hawk's airframe to accommodate the Allison V1710 liquid-cooled V12 inline engine, an engine that, while lacking a turbo supercharger in its early versions and therefore limited in high-altitude performance, provided a rugged, reliable, and relatively powerful solution for low to medium-altitude combat, which would define much of the P-40's operational profile. The prototype, known as the XP-40, first flew in 1938 and demonstrated enough promise for the United States Army Air Corps USAAC to order production, leading to the P-40's entry into service just as the world was sliding into global war, and the aircraft was quickly recognized for its strengths: excellent dive speed, strong armament, durability in combat, and suitability for ground attack roles, alongside its weaknesses: mediocre climb rate, limited ceiling, and lack of maneuverability against agile enemy fighters like the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0. Despite these shortcomings, the Warhawk gained fame in the early stages of America's entry into World War II, most famously through the exploits of the American volunteer group AVG, better known as the Flying Tigers, who flew P-40s with their iconic shark mouth nose art in defense of China against Japanese aggression even before the U.S. officially entered the war, and the AVG's successes, achieved through disciplined tactics that emphasized diving attacks and avoiding turning dogfights with Zeros, demonstrated that the Warhawk, in the hands of skilled pilots, could hold its own and even excel under the right circumstances. The P-40's rugged construction made it particularly suited for operations in harsh environments where maintenance facilities were limited, such as the deserts of North Africa or the jungles of Burma, and it could withstand substantial damage and still return to base, earning it the respect of the men who flew and serviced it. In North Africa, the P-40 was the backbone of the Allied air forces during the critical early years of the campaign against the German Afrika Korps and its formidable Luftwaffe support, and though the Warhawk often faced technically superior opponents such as the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf FW-190, Allied pilots learned to exploit the P-40's strengths in diving attacks, teamwork, and low-altitude engagements, achieving hard-fought victories that helped turn the tide of the Desert War. In the Pacific, P-40s defended Australia, New Guinea, and other critical outposts, again showing that while they might not outturn Japanese fighters, they could outdive, outshoot, and outlast them, particularly when flown with discipline and tactical awareness. In the China-Burma-India theater, beyond the Flying Tigers, P-40s continued to play a vital role throughout the conflict, providing close air support, bomber escort, and interdiction missions that kept Japanese forces under pressure. The Warhawk also saw service with numerous Allied air forces beyond the U.S., including the Royal Air Force RAF, Royal Australian Air Force RAAF, Royal Canadian Air Force RCAF, South African Air Force SAAF, Soviet Air Force, and others, with the British giving the name Tomahawk to the early P-40B and P-40C variants and Kitty Hawk to the later P-40D and beyond, and in Soviet hands, the aircraft proved surprisingly effective on the Eastern Front, particularly in low-level ground attack missions where its ruggedness and firepower were highly valued. In terms of design evolution, the P-40 went through numerous variants, beginning with the P-40B and C models which retained much of the Hawk 75's airframe and carried 4 to 6.30 caliber or .50 caliber machine guns, then moving to the P-40D and E, which featured more powerful Allison engines, improved armament, typically 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns, and refined aerodynamics, with the P-40E becoming one of the most widely produced and deployed versions. Later models such as the P-40F and L replaced the Allison with the Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the same engine used in the Spitfire and later P-51 Mustang, which improved medium-altitude performance somewhat, though still not to the level of top-tier contemporaries, and subsequent P-40K, M, and N models focused on incremental improvements in weight reduction, cooling, and armament. The final P-40N, also known as the Kitty Hawk IV, in Commonwealth service, was the most produced variant, with over 5,000 built, featuring lighter construction, improved visibility from a cut-down rear fuselage and sliding canopy, and provisions for bombs or drop tanks that allowed it to serve as both a fighter and fighter-bomber. Across all versions, more than 13,700 P-40s were built between 1939 and 1944, making it the third most produced American fighter of World War II after the P-51 Mustang and P-47 Thunderbolt, a testament to its importance in sustaining Allied air power during the critical middle years of the war before more advanced designs could arrive in sufficient numbers. Pilots who flew the P-40 often remarked on its heavy controls at high altitude and relatively slow climb compared to Axis fighters, but they also praised its toughness, dive speed, and ability to take punishment, and its relatively simple design made it easier to maintain in the field compared to more complex aircraft. The aircraft's cultural and psychological impact was also considerable, with the shark mouth paint scheme of the Flying Tigers becoming one of the most iconic images of the war, symbolizing American determination and ferocity in the face of adversity, and the Warhawk appeared in countless wartime posters, films, and newsreels, reinforcing its status as a recognizable workhorse of the air war. In combat, P-40 pilots claimed thousands of enemy aircraft destroyed, and while some of these numbers are subject to the usual wartime inflation, there is no doubt that the Warhawk made a decisive contribution to the Allied cause, buying precious time and holding the line until newer fighters could be fielded in greater numbers. After the war, the P-40 was quickly retired from frontline U.S. service as jet aircraft and superior piston-engine fighters like the P-51 dominated, but many surplus Warhawks continued to serve in smaller air forces around the world for several years, and today, restored examples are prized by museums, private collectors, and airshow performers who keep the legend alive for new generations. In the final analysis, the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk stands as a classic example of an aircraft that, while not the fastest, most agile, or most advanced of its era, nonetheless achieved greatness through its adaptability, reliability, and the courage of the men who flew it, embodying the principle that wars are often won not by perfect machines but by good enough designs used effectively and in sufficient numbers, and its legacy endures not only in history books but in the memories of those who witnessed its shark-mouthed silhouette diving through the skies in some of the most desperate and decisive battles of the 20th century.